Hey, hey, hey. All right, party people, welcome. You are live on Shelley's Alley. I need some kind of special effects. This is the only one that I can come up with. It's wait, that's not the best one. Maybe this one's better. There you go.
Oh,
You are
nice.
live on Shelley's Alley. Awesome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It is the last episode in April 25th, Friday, April 25th. And we're shifting things a little bit today. We are going to have a conversation about something I don't get to talk about a lot, which is within the space of HR tech. It's system administration, sysadmins, if you will, in the HR tech space. So I was referred to Alex, who's an innovator, recognized innovator in the TA/HR technology universe, and a founder founded the organization called System Admin Insights, which is part of Integral Recruiting Design. I think I got that straight.
That's right.
Yeah. So he works with community-driven solutions for systems administrators and helps advance recruiting strategies. So everything from sourcing performance models to leveraging data to market changes and everything. So we want to talk a little bit about performance and sourcing and industry performance and how data can help us reshape our landscape, and how basically systems administration can be a key to being successful with enterprise HR technology. Something that we don't talk a lot about. I mean, usually, what would you say, Alex, in an organization, a typical organization, there's like one, maybe two people that do this job? They're
Depends on
the
the company size. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I was just hanging out with NYU and Fujifilm this morning. We did our first SAI live session here in New York City. And some companies have multiple system administrators. Some
One
companies,
for each system, or what?
well, no. So let's say a company under 1,500 employees typically does not have a person who's dedicated full time to system administration, and it lands on the plate either of a recruiter who's great at spreadsheets, or even a TA manager who has many other competing priorities. Right. Once you get
Mhm.
into like the 3, 4, 5,000 employee range, you get companies who have a person who is full time dedicated just to running their ATS. And then once you go global,
Right.
companies with 10, 20,000, they typically have a primary system administrator, and then they have subsystem administrators who could fill in for that person and who manage the functionality in different regions globally.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So there'd be like subsystems or other systems, alternative systems, or
yeah,
regional. Got it. But it
exactly.
is it is pretty much one of those kind of like um, the unsung hero, if you will, right?
That's
You
it.
you started Systems Admin Insights to lift HR sysadmins out of isolation,
Yes.
which it's the in your opinion, and your estimation, it's the single biggest blind spot that executives have about their sysadmin and their HR tech function. So this was kind of like your I don't know, your call to your calling, I guess, to elevate
Yeah.
that. So um, what measurable action would you have them take, people that are listening, what measurable action would you have them take this quarter to prove that they finally get the importance of this role, this blind spot, if you will?
Wow, that's interesting. Um, in fact, we were talking about this morning. It's like, how do you message up the value that you're bringing to an organization? I think the real prize here, the thing that these folks should really be focusing on, is quantifying ROI. I have
Okay.
talked to so many TA leaders who cannot tell me their cost per hire. And it's because although it's a simple concept, there are so many areas of nuance and ambiguity that actually figuring out what your cost per hire is can be quite daunting. These system administrators are extremely well positioned to assist in that conversation because they understand the data on a very deep level. I talked to one system administrator recently. We were looking at his ISIMS dashboard reporting, and he said, my manager wants to bring down our time to fill to 30 days, and currently it's 58 days. And I said, okay, let's look at your reporting. And so we dug under the hood, reconfigured their reporting to remove outliers, right? Some other nuances in the system, and discovered that he was actually almost already there.
Yeah.
He was within 2 days of meeting that time to fill goal just because the reporting hadn't been configured correctly. So, if we're building up that internal role of the HR system administrator, and keep in mind, most of these people do not have formal IT training, right? They came from recruiting, they came from sales, they happen to be tech savvy, and somebody at some point had the bright idea to say, "Hey, why don't you run the ATS?" Right? So, if we build up this professional role, we can get them to the place where they can actually transform the conversation around HR tech investments from being a transactional thing. A lot of leaders are just happy with the thing running and not being on fire, to getting to the place where they can say, this is actually a driver of ROI. And if we make these optimization changes, we're actually going to bring down time to fill by X number of days, and it's going to be equal. It's going to result in this specific dollar amount of estimated cost savings. That for me is like the holy grail of this profession, and, it's a lot of folks are not there yet, but we're trying to get them there.
So I appreciate what you're saying with regard to getting the garbage out of the data, because that's basically one of the biggest failure points in calculating anything. I mean, I worked with an organization as a consultant. I don't just do HRIS or systems. I also work with strategy and leadership and everything. And I worked with this organization where they were confident that their time to hire, time to well, what they were. And by the way, people define time to hire different ways.
Yes, I
You've
do.
time to offer, accept, time
Yep,
to start,
yep,
time to But the job posting, let's call it job posting to position filled because the person actually starts
yep,
that day
yep,
is one of them. And so
yep,
they were confident that they had a number for that, which was 75 days.
mhm,
And in this industry, it's not unheard of for people to give a little bit longer notice. So hence the little bit lengthier time, which is
yep,
calculated in there.
yeah,
And when you report on this, you definitely want to report on the fact that you have this is how long it took us to post the rec. This is how long it took us to get an offer, and this is how long it took us to get the person to start. Because
mhm,
from the offer accept to the start date is kind of not necessarily something that you can really change all that much if people need to give notice periods, right?
mhm,
Um, and they were convinced that it was 75 days, but after
mhm,
looking at the data, there were some calculation gaps that turned out it was actually a lot more like 190 days.
yeah, yeah. Well, at each one of those milestones, there are about 5 or 6 different ways that you can measure it. So, for example, time to
Right. And you
fill.
really need to break that down. I think it's
Yes,
important that you say, here's you guys wanted, the leadership team, you wanted time to hire. Here's time to hire. However, the bar that says time to hire is broken into these three, four,
yes,
five pieces because we may not be able to move these.
right,
There's in other countries outside of the U.S. there's mandatory uh, notice periods of 2 months, 6 months. So you're not going to be able to get in Germany a time to hire of under 2 months ever,
right. That's
ever, because it takes 2 months to give. They have to have 2 months notice,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So it's interesting that you say that, and the systems don't really take into consideration. They're just looking at the raw data.
And well, let's talk about time to approve. Right?
Yep, time to
Approvals
approve.
could be very different depending on where you are in the organization.
Mhm.
And we can get more and more granular to get to every single action point and make a time based metric out of it, depending on how thorough a deep dive you want to do.
So where I was going with that, though, I was going to ask, um, is it really? uh, I mean, I think personally, and this is I'm going to obviously ruffle some feathers here, but I really think that the time that it takes to hire, however you measure it, really is not um, useful in any way, because it doesn't it doesn't help us make any decisions if it's not correct, right? So what I would like to, which I don't see very frequently, is I would like to know how long it's going to take us to fill a job so
Hmm.
that I can prepare my leadership to essentially let them know, if you guys want to hire somebody for this job, you need to start thinking about that
Hmm.
at this date, because that's how long we need, that's how much lead time we need. That's
Hmm.
what I would love to know. But the reality is that this time to fill metric doesn't really do that.
I would argue that it can.
It can, but that's my point.
As
Exactly
long
my
as it's
point.
configured correctly, and I
It
think
doesn't, and that's the
right, yeah,
problem.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of TA leaders, they can kinda smell that, and they know that, like, I guess that looks right, but do I really feel confident in it?" Like, to feel confident in those figures, you need to have somebody in that role, again, the system administrator, who you know has a level of training and sophistication and experience
Mhm.
to really deliver metrics that are bulletproof. And that's just, it's a matter of professional development.
Yeah, okay, that's what you're
Yeah,
saying
yeah,
is the key there.
yeah.
Okay.
And
So
community,
you
right?
have a, community that you
Yes.
run. This is that voluntary thing, or is it a,
So
um
there's 2 tiers. There's a general membership, and there is a free call for ISIM system administrators every Friday at 1:30 PM. Now, we've had over 700 ISIMS customers come through that free call experience over the last 5 years. And then there is a private community that includes unlimited, small group, office hours with our full-time team of ISIMS consultants.
and that's the systems admin
Yeah, it's all system
insights?
admin insights. There's an
Got it,
ISIMS
2,
community
okay,
in
got
there.
it.
Yeah. Mhm.
Right, so this is for, HRIS, HR tech systems administrators to share, compare notes, learn professional development, ask, troubleshoot, ask for problem,
Yes.
recommendations, and not recommendations on what problems to have, but how to solve them.
Yeah. No, exactly.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
Yep.
pretty cool. I'm glad that I didn't even know that existed.
Yeah.
So you have built, I guess, two user communities, and user communities, by the way, just for folks that are out there listening, it is not easy to build a user community.
No.
Companies that have large install bases have a hard time building user communities, and they have all the population they need. It's still not an you don't just it, I guess I'm getting stuck in my own words here. If you build it, they will come is really not
Nope. Nope.
true when it comes to user communities. So you have the SAI, and then you have the ISIMS one. Um, when you reverse engineer, or if you could reverse engineer the success of these communities, can you give us maybe three design principles that can really get a user group to become self-fueling and not obviously, I
Mm,
mean, you could be in there administering and participating, but how will we get it to self-fueling?
yeah. So, we hired a consultant who had successfully built a community called foundingmoms.com. So it's for
Oh,
mom
okay.
entrepreneurs. And without her name's Jill Saltzman, and without her guidance, I don't think we ever would have gotten this over the
So
finish
she's
line.
a community building expert.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, got it.
And at the end of the day, it all comes down to trust and authenticity, right? Everybody wants a community, and just like you said, they want to let's slap it up there and expect folks will come and hang out and interact and thrive. It is its
Yeah,
own full time job, right? And
being the community manager.
managing the community, building, architecting the community,
uh,
strategizing the community. It is a big lift, and I would advise people not to do it unless I'm really into community building. I love it. I've been doing community building in my life in various ways throughout my career, my personal life. It really is a passion for me. I would say you need somebody running your community who is passionate about community management, right? We are in there constantly providing value, connecting people, providing extra value. We have a special guest consultant coming in to do office hours. We're doing these live events now. We're
mhm.
constantly pouring value into this community, really because it's it's what makes my heart sing, and I think the whole team would agree. This is really the things that are going on there and the fun that people are having. And another thing I would say is that we have been very intentional around keeping it non-salesy. Of course, we have some courses and services that we mention, but we don't allow vendors in the product specific communities. We want to make sure that this is a safe place for
For the
authentic
practitioners. Okay.
interaction. And what we're noticing on the back end in the metrics, we use circle.so. It's a fantastic platform. I would highly recommend it. They're constantly shipping new functionality. They're very AI forward. We can see the metrics, and we can see that half of first of all, we're in the highest engagement tier according to Circle in terms of like monthly active users. But that activity is not just posts and discussions, it's DMs. Right. So people don't necessarily want to be on LinkedIn, right? You're on LinkedIn, you're constantly getting bombarded with sales and various things. Like, you want to be in a safe space where you can just nerd out about iSIMs or whatever the product community is that you're in, right? And we're expanding to other product communities as well. You want to be able to nerd out with people that you trust, and you can DM them and get the answers that you need. And there's also a functionality that we built in where you can search for other members based on what platforms they use, what industries, what company sizes, what specific modules they're using, right? So all of that architecting, it really took, I think, a year before I was able to realize the vision that I had originally had about a year and a half ago. So,
Hmm.
yeah,
Wow.
it's
Okay.
really
So
humming along.
takes time.
It takes time and
Takes
effort
time.
and
Okay.
passion. Yeah,
Yep. All right. So those are that was my answer. Those are the three things. I just kind of recap here.
yeah,
Um, Basically, trust and authenticity,
yeah,
which is parentheses, keep it non-salesy, right?
yeah,
It's a full-time job for someone, and that person needs to be someone who is a community manager, they either knows or is passionate or is going to learn it, and that's going to be a primary function. Otherwise, it's not going to just run itself, right?
yeah.
Then the third thing was well, I guess the part of that uh, sidebar on that is keep it active. Like you have
Yes.
that person has to, you continue adding content. So I guess that's really two. This is like two, one part be A and B, two part A and B.
Yeah.
And well, I guess the third one is to have a platform that's actually a community platform,
Well, we looked at
not
a
some kind
few.
of
We looked at
yeah,
Mighty Networks, Heartbeat, and a couple of others, and I felt like Circle, just from the UI, you can just tell that it is very current, right?
clean and simple. And
Yeah, and after the first 3 months, I feel like every month they ship some news. This is not an advertisement for Circle, but
I
every
love
few
it when
months.
companies do that. Yeah, I have a LMS
Yeah,
that does that, and every couple of months they launch a feature that I'm like, "Ooh, I didn't know we could do." Like
yeah, yep,
I could use that. It's not features that I'm like desperately waiting for. Like, when are you guys gonna do this? It's more like I already have what I need,
yep,
but they'll come up with this feature, and I'm like, "Ooh, I know how I can take care. Like, I can
yep,
implement that right now." So I love
yeah,
that.
yeah,
That's usually pretty good um, product design and
yep.
kind of staying on top of things.
They
Um,
understand their customers very, very
yeah,
quickly.
yeah, and they're
Yep,
definitely adding value a lot because
yeah,
I mean, people can switch. It's not that hard to switch nowadays.
yeah,
Platforms. It used to be a lot harder, but not as much anymore.
yeah,
So, all right. Well, then the uh, the next generation admin playbook,
yeah,
AI, workflow automation,
yep,
low code. Let's take a I don't know crystal ball,
sure,
magic window, whatever magic wand. It project out maybe 3 years.
yep.
What new capability are sysadmins and the leadership teams that will need to hire sysadmins
Mhm.
need to understand and master
I
or be replaced or automated into obscurity.
Yeah, so I think the full maturation of this role will be a title of HR Systems Orchestration Engineer, right?
Okay.
I
Well,
think
what is that
yeah.
capability then?
So I think SaaS as we know it is going to fall further and further underneath the surface of what you're actually experiencing as a knowledge worker, a technology worker in HR and other areas as well. So you're going to be interacting with AI and the ATS, the HCM, all these systems are going to be below the surface of an interface where you are the orchestrator. And so this is a metaphor that I learned from Josh Burson. He talks about the super worker, right? So you are the conductor of a symphony of agentic AI bots who are taking orders from you, right? And you are assessing the impact of what they're doing. And then you are taking that information and you are going to town with analytics in a way that we would all love to, but don't have the time to do it. So the durable
That
skill.
sounds idyllic, but I don't think that that's a special skill.
Ooh, I would say it is because it requires an understanding of 4 or 5 different domains that are these are skills that are even if we don't get there, these
I'm
are
just
skills.
feeling like it sounds like you have the agents to do the work for you. So your orchestration is really more just understanding the business.
Um, I think it will take a nuanced understanding of
Okay.
integrations, of APIs, of
Even though the APIs are supposed to be handled by
I can't tell you how many times I've heard, "Oh, we had an integration between this system, and
yeah,
then
I know.
something happened."
But isn't that
Right?
what Agentic is going to fix? You don't need integrations anymore,
So it will, I mean,
supposedly.
maybe someday, right? But every technology innovation I've seen, it is effective to a point, and then there are edge cases that can completely
Right.
derail something
Yeah.
that nobody anticipated, and
Yeah.
that's where human judgment is going to be critical.
That's always going to be the
Yeah,
case. Yeah, there's always edge cases.
yeah,
Edge cases, I mean, doesn't matter how well, with any automation, the only thing that you could really automate completely and unsupervised is when it is 100% repetitive
yeah,
and the outcome is the same each time. The moment that you have any variability, you really need to have someone supervising it because there's going to be edge cases. But I mean, if it's literally hammer a nail into a piece of wood and you have to hammer it at the same degree, at the same speed, the same strength, and it's the same nail
yeah.
over and over again, not the same nail, but the same quality manufacturing nail, yes, you can fully automate that. But if it's varying pieces of wood or varying lengths of, now you have a robot that can handle most everything, but every once in a while. So yeah, I get that. I guess what I'm saying is, um, isn't the, and I am, please understand, I am playing devil's advocate in that I get this question
Yeah.
from a lot of people that are not aware of exactly what agentic is
Yeah.
and are being sold a bag of bullshit
Yeah.
from vendors that are selling something that is really not agentic.
Right.
So the seller doesn't understand what agentic is and the buyer doesn't understand the economic buyer doesn't understand what agentic is, and they purchase this and then the user has to use it thinking that this is what the economic buyer told them, hey, this new system's going to do it,
Yep.
but doesn't. So the reason I'm asking this is people are under the impression that agentic means it's a robot that can log into a website and do stuff for you and you don't have to train it.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's the case, why do we need APIs anymore?
Um, well, your system, they're not just going to be logging into a website and doing something would be the least inefficient way for it to do that task.
You,
Yeah.
granted, but right now, let's just use a real life example, right?
Okay.
CRM, ATS, and HRIS. Let's call it, So you got your CRM where you have your people that you're trying to get in touch with. They're not candidates. They haven't applied. They may or may not be interested. And
Mm-hmm.
you need to do relationship management and they're not associated with a rec. Then you have your ATS. They're now associated with a rec. There's a hiring manager. There's an interview process. There's a system that is in place. And then you hired them and perhaps maybe even onboarded them. And now they need to go into the system where they get laptops issued and their payroll and benefits and all that. So these are three different systems,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
It's pretty common to see CRMs that don't talk to ATSs,
Yep.
other than one way, like sending stuff, right? But not the other way, right? It's common to see ATSs that once again feed HRIS, but again one way, and it's almost like a batch export. Here's a dump.
Yep.
So what a lot of times happens is a user is basically going in and cleaning things up and matching fields and they're using a browser and
Yep.
they're very inefficiently, as you just said,
Mm-hmm.
very inefficiently uh, copy pasting, dragging, drop, whatever
Right.
across so the vision is that the agent is going to replace that meaningless tedium job that is it's very valuable and it's very important because it keeps the hygiene between the systems, right?
Yeah.
But it's kind of a really mind-numbing job. So that's what agentic is supposed to be. But you're saying that the real solution of agentic is not like copy paste type stuff. It's more what? It's explain it to the people that have this misconception. What is it really?
Okay. So let's say for some reason when you implemented your ATS, you put hiring managers in the wrong login group down your data hierarchy, right?
Yep.
And you're a global organization, and there's certain downstream implications of that.
This never happens, by the way, ever.
You
It
never,
happens,
never,
right?
never see this, right? And you decide, hey, really, I want this login group to be over here with the other hiring managers instead of with the recruiters or wherever it was built,
Right.
right? There is a just incredibly complicated spaghetti of things that are connected there, right?
Yeah.
And to disentangle all of that,
I,
right?
I only know this from personal firsthand experience. So sorry, I'm laughing, but yeah, yes.
TA leader might not appreciate the amount of effort that's going to go into that, right? Your HR system administrator, meanwhile, is this like burning the midnight oil, trying to figure this all out and try to get this reconfigured.
Been there.
Um, that right? There are
Yes.
security rules attached to this, search locks
Yep.
attached to this, right? Visibility issues, right? That is something where I can imagine that AI at some point could search through all of the configurations in the back end, stuff that we're never going to
Okay.
see, right? And reconfigure that for you in a config site first. So then then the human can then verify that it was done correctly and that it is having the correct downstream impact. That's one thing that I feel like is a uniquely valuable thing about this type of professional role. Like, we understand what it's trying to do, and then we can go look at what it did and give a thumbs up or a thumbs down or give it feedback. Like, you missed this subgroup, or now our background checks aren't working the way that we wanted them to, or now this report over here on this
Right.
dashboard isn't working, right? Like, so that type of awareness of the impact on human beings using these systems, I think, is something that requires a deep level of technical understanding without actually performing the work itself. Does that make sense?
It does to me.
Yeah.
So this skill then is no longer just kind of having the know how to use icems, perhaps as an example,
Mhm.
but actually learning about how these systems are interconnected and understanding the business side of the environment as well as the technology side of the environment, things like security and user roles, and also understanding the capabilities of whatever, you know, robotic process automation, RPA, which is what we're talking. Agentic. I don't know why this happened, but agentic is basically RPA, right?
Mhm. Yep.
Um, Robotic process automation. So
Yep.
whatever that, and that's been around for a long time, by the way. It's just the birth of this new agentic for folks that are out there listening. So you used to have robotic process automation, and you used to have machine learning. Machine learning sort of evolved into what we now call AI, which is really not actually true AI. It's not artificial intelligence. It's really large language models with lots of machine learning that are able to, um, you know, trial and error and determine things and help you work faster. And then you have robotic process automation that is very difficult to set up and configure. And somehow those two are sort of coming together. And that's what agentic really is.
Mhm.
RPA with Gen AI on top of it.
Yep.
So you're saying that we need to understand the business, the technology, the rules, and the AI, and that's the key. That's the key skill. Is that orchestration is actually really that complicated?
I'll give you another
Okay.
example. I had a young person came to me and asked me whether it was still worth it to learn how to code. Right?
Yep.
This kid was like 15 years old,
Yep.
and I said, "Absolutely yes, and I can hire somebody for $7 an hour in Bangladesh who will code for me all day long." Right? So it is very important to learn the skill of coding, right? So that you understand the architecture. But is there going to be a job for you as a coder as we conceive of coding? I don't think so, or you shouldn't bank on it, right? So,
I see
yes,
what you mean.
understand
Sort
how
of
these things
like,
work. Yeah.
should I really learn the multiplication tables because there's calculators? And
Perfect example. Absolutely.
yes, you should
Yeah.
learn multiplication tables
Yeah.
because you probably don't, you're not going to do multiplication tables for a living.
Yep.
And even if you become a mathematician, you're still not, but
Yep.
mathematicians today use computing and all kinds of stuff, but you still need to know the fundamentals.
Yeah.
However, I would say this. So going back to the edge cases thing, when it comes to um, software engineering today, still today, we have embedded devices and software that's written, that's coded to that device. So there's always going to be specializations.
Yes.
And in software engineering, there's going to be robots that don't know how to do it because there's not enough examples for it to do. In other words, if the language model, if the training data isn't large enough, the robot can't learn. So there's always going to be situations where um, this is software that only exists on F-16 fighter jets.
Mhm.
Let's not use an AI for that.
Mhm.
But again, that's not, so you don't, what you're saying is don't bank on that as a career. So for us, that means in HR systems administration, it's don't bank on knowing how to configure iCIMS as a job, but learn how to configure multiple systems and how they connect to each other, because that's probably more valuable.
That's what I'm calling the durable skills of this
Okay,
profession. Yeah.
got it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not what are the fields in iCIMS or Workday or whatever. It's how do we make these things connect? What's important? What's not important? What are the things that could go wrong? right?
I mean, look, I really built a business around being an ISIMS reporting savant.
Right.
I love ISIMS reporting, and I would do it all day long for fun.
But
But should ISIMS make that go away so that it's just a natural language interface where you can say, "I need such and such reporting," and it builds it for you? Probably. And it
that
hurts
deep
my heart a little bit,
knowledge,
like,
yeah, right. But that deep knowledge is still going to make you an expert,
Yeah,
except you'll be the expert that is training the AI.
yes.
You'll be the expert that is developing this, the behind the scenes stuff. Everyday users don't need to be Alex Marcus, the iSIMS expert. Just like everybody asks me, oh, is sourcing obsolete? No, absolutely not. Sourcing
Right.
is not going to go away. Sourcing is becoming more difficult because of the edge cases, right? And
Yeah.
because we have a different problem now that I don't know if a lot of folks really considered or understand, which is there's too much information.
Yep.
And too much information is just as much a problem as not enough information.
Yep.
In
Absolutely.
systems administration,
Yep.
data that is unclean, that has gaps, you can work around it by filling the gaps, or you can work around it by creating models that take into consideration the gaps and have margins of error. But it still has giant gaps missing, right? So you have the problem of not enough information. And in the future, 3 years from now, too much information.
Yeah.
Because now we have 27 different systems, Beeline and Workday and this and the other, and they're all talking to each other. But AI might be really good at doing things like, for example, here's a really fun one that you might like. So 7 different systems at this very large Fortune 10 company where I was working and advising. 7 different systems in the whole HR ecosystem, TA and HR, and 3 different nomenclatures for names,
Sure.
right? In one system,
Yeah.
I was Shelley Stech. In another system, I was Steckerl, Shelley.
Mm-hmm.
And in
Mm-hmm.
another system, I was Steckerl, A, and my full name.
Mm-hmm.
And my full name isn't Shelley. So, for example, I don't know if your full name is Alexander or
It
not, but
is.
let's say you have Alex Marcus,
Yep.
Marcus Alex, and
Yep.
Marcus J. Alexander, 3 different systems.
Yep.
And matching the information between those was impossible because one system used the social security number as a key,
Exactly.
the other one used the candidate, right? So even the key point or the data, the data keys are different. So like, oh my God, right? So Agentic might be able to help with that.
I think it certainly can. I mean, the use case that we see over and over again is with merging duplicate records, right? So candidates
Because of Shelley and Shelley
in
A
the
and
same
Steckerl.
system, right?
Yep, yep.
But also the same name, but different email addresses. They applied with their Gmail, they applied with their Outlook, they applied with their Yahoo
Even
address.
with the same name,
I've
right?
I've seen 25 different email addresses of the same
Right.
person, right? And so you might think, and here's a good example where human discernment is important. You might think that you should just turn AI loose and merging those duplicate records and gather enough information to be able to tell, but there's also a compliance issue there. Do you actually want to do that? Are there compliance implications for putting all of those records together? Right. And that's a conversation that needs to be had with your general
I did not
counsel.
ask that question.
What's that?
I did not ask that question. I just
Yeah.
realized I did not ask that
Well,
question.
that's something I learned. Yeah, that's
I did
something I
not
learned.
ask if there's compliance issues
Yes.
because,
Yeah.
well, actually, now that I think about it, there wasn't, but I didn't ask and I should have.
Yeah. Well, this is something I learned from Vivian Larson, who joined our team a few months ago. She spent 10 years at ISIMS on their global strategic accounts, and she brought that up to me because I had a very similar conversation like this, and it hadn't occurred to me either. So don't feel bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thankfully, I'm thinking back and going, no, there wasn't, but I can easily see how there would be.
Yeah.
Basically, disclosure, privacy, you know,
Did I consent here and not here?
yeah, that's my point. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Consent and
Yeah.
privacy, and also
Yeah.
reporting
Yep.
regulations
Yep.
and what's
Yep. Yeah.
what the government requires you to not disclose, and what the government requires you to disclose based on where the data is housed is actually really different. Like
Yep.
candidate data, for example, um, you are allowed to know the gender of your employees if they are employees in your HRIS system for a variety of business reasons
Yeah.
and governmental reasons. But in your application process, it's not a good idea. At least not a good idea to let
Yep.
everybody know,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Like
Yep.
you might not want to. So, and now all of a sudden you have And that's just one of them, right? I mean, there's medical and there's so many. I just realized that. But we were literally just trying to correlate. So
Yeah.
glad you picked that up.
Yep.
So that's a really interesting. Yeah, and I want to go back into how the hell did you get into this, man? I mean, you were like a program manager way back in the day, and program director, I think, and then you did org development,
Yeah.
and then somehow you ended up getting bounced into TA, and then you went into founding your own company, and now you're sysadmin. Like, where did things go wrong for a musician from Austin?
Well, if you've ever tried to live on a tour bus with 5
No,
other
I have not.
musicians, it's not pleasant for an introvert like me who does. I'm a guy who does spreadsheets for fun, to relax, right?
Yeah,
And
I can
so
relate.
the musician's life was not for me. I had a lot of fun doing it. But after that, I really enjoyed teaching violin. And so I moved to New York City and did a program called the New York City Teaching Fellows. And they paid for my master's at Pace. And I was a classroom teacher for a few years. And then that turned into an opportunity to be a social work supervisor. I don't have a social work license, but I was supervising a team at a
Oh,
night school program in
so
Brooklyn.
you're a
So
manager,
yeah,
not a
yeah,
social worker,
yeah.
right?
Working for a nonprofit where we were helping overage undercredited kids get their high school degrees at night. I was really interested in. I mean, I really love being a team leader. I was very interested in helping my staff understand their benefits, and
Hmm.
HR sent out a communication regarding 3 or 4 different healthcare plans that you could select. And I remember looking at this and I couldn't make sense. I spent like 5 hours trying to make sense of this. My
Oh,
staff
yeah.
certainly couldn't make sense of this. And
Okay.
so right and so since I do spreadsheets for fun, I decided to create an app essentially with Excel using VBA. It was essentially an app that asked you for various information and tells you which plan you should choose in natural language
Okay.
and how much you should put in your HSA or your FSA, right?
Yeah,
And
that's pretty cool.
it was super
People
fun
have lots of
project.
questions about that.
Yeah, and I showed it to the HR director, and at that time, he was thinking about getting a new applicant tracking system. And we started talking. He started inviting me to these HR meetings where they were bringing in staff from the field. And he said, "Look, you want to come join HR? You have the interest in people. Right? You're interested in helping people use our systems more effectively. And we're going to implement an ATS. How does that sound?" And I didn't know what 90% of the words in that sentence were, what they meant. But I said,
How does that sound?
implementing a who,
It was
right?
an ATS.
But I was like, sure, I was ready for a new challenge, and I really was excited to move to the central office and kind of see what was going on there, and understanding the big picture of how the organization ran.
Yeah.
So that's how it got started. And then in 2020, COVID happened, and they sent us to work from home,
Oh,
and
okay.
that's when I founded this online learning community because I wanted to talk to other people doing
Because you come
ISIMS
from
work.
teaching and you're trying to understand. Yeah, okay, that makes a
Yeah,
whole lot of sense.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And so
So
this,
you yeah, you used to play well, I mean, you probably still do, but this was your job is you played fiddle,
yeah, mhm,
right?
yeah.
So what is the difference between a fiddle and a violin?
That's a great question.
I have an answer, but I don't think it's the correct one.
The person playing it.
That's the difference. Okay.
I mean, I could go so the more technical answer is a fiddle. That music is folk music, and there's a long folk tradition of people playing who did not receive classical training.
Right.
Structurally, it's the exact same instrument,
Right.
right?
Well, except for one difference, which is what I thought. That's at least this is what was explained to me
Yeah,
in Nashville at the Rock and Roll Museum or Hall of Fame. I
yeah.
forgot the name, and that is that a violin has strings, but a fiddle has strings.
That's a much better answer than the one I gave you. I'm going to use that instead. Yeah, I like
Oh,
that.
that's great. That's
Yeah,
great.
yeah,
Excellent. So yeah, so you've got the creative, you got the teaching bug. I can definitely relate to that.
yeah.
And then you ended up, kind of in between world of like tech plus teaching
Yeah.
plus creative, and that's how you ended up in this world.
Yeah.
Um, so wow, okay. Uh, we talked about the next generation playbook. We talked about um, the quantifying the ROI. We talked about community as a force multiplier.
Yeah.
Um, what else is out there that people really don't understand or need to understand better or think they understand but don't really understand, right? About HR systems administration. Like, people say, "Oh, I'm an HR sysadmin or whatever," and folks go, "Oh, yeah, yeah, I know what that means." But what is it they really don't know?
Hmm. Um, just how impactful a person in this role can be in driving business outcomes.
Okay.
This is not somebody who is just clicking stuff all day long. This is somebody who has their hands deep in your data, and effectively using your data is something that I find a lot of folks in TA aren't totally comfortable with, right? And so they know that they should be generating metrics. Do they get to the place where they are actually driving conversations forward from an analytical perspective? Your best friend is a well trained system administrator, right? And the extent to which you can have a productive dialogue that stays out of the weeds for the most part, that's one
Okay.
thing that's very so that is a blind spot for a lot of folks in this role because we're techie and we're proud of our deep subject matter expertise. And sometimes if you get us talking on something, we kind of get fixated and can't pump the brakes, right? So you have to
Hmm.
build. I would suggest that TA leaders really get to know them well and build a relationship where they can give you just enough information and you can tell them what you need the system to do and what's important for you,
Let them
right?
do it.
I think there's a partnership here that when it works well can be incredibly fruitful, but often that role and you see it when folks are just like, oh, we bought the Lamborghini of ATSs and I guess it's going to run itself, or maybe
Never
Joe
does.
Recruiter is going to run it in his spare time. No,
Yeah.
this is if you invested in sophisticated purpose-built enterprise technology, resource it appropriately and have realistic expectations about what that's going to take, what it's going to cost.
This sounds a lot like sourcing.
Hmm.
It sounds a lot like sourcing. A lot of the same misconceptions of it. So, um, what role can be because, and I've prefaced this by saying that in a lot of ways, the information that we deal with in sourcing is pre-HRIS. It's not
Mhm.
in the HRIS necessarily. I mean, it
Yeah.
sometimes can be, and there's definitely overlap. But by and large, if you are trying to identify candidates that you don't already know, you don't already have, then they're not in your systems somewhere. So, what is the role of modern systems administration in regard to sourcing? How can sourcing leverage the sysadmins?
So it's a huge topic. I would say the thing that should be front of mind is silver medalists.
Mhm.
You may not need more candidates. You may have entered somebody 3, 6, 9 months ago who was perfectly suited for this other role. And if you are not tagging them appropriately in this system, that is a huge missed opportunity.
Got it.
Yeah,
And the sysadmin can help with that.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that's in the ATS.
It's in the ATS, and it's a matter of creating the protocol for tagging them correctly, and then surfacing that information through a customized report that you put in your dashboard and show to the right people at the right time.
So is there like components of kind of like library science in here? Because one of the things that you um when you have nonfiction, there's like the ready and proven Dewey Decimal System that catalogs and categorizes the sciences and all that.
Yeah,
But the entire world of nonfiction, there's really, I mean, basically, you go to a bookstore and it's like sort of tentatively by subject matter. It's not even really definitely by subject matter. So, how can we categorize information like that for sourcing? I mean, is that something the sysadmin really kind of comes up with? Like, how are we, what are the tags? What's the tagging structure? What's the nesting of the tags? Like, the what some people might refer to as the taxonomy, right?
yeah. I mean, that's something that I think each company needs to determine on their own, but I don't think it
But the
needs to be.
sysadmin,
I don't think it needs to be terribly complicated. right?
No, but
You
it's
know,
usually missing.
it's usually missing because it's a functionality. I mean, I can speak on a very technical perspective about iSIMs.
A
Other
lot of
systems,
ATSs have the ability to tag, but people don't, they just willy-nilly create random tags. And so you have things in there that have been tagged by one tag that, only one candidate has that one tag.
so
And that really doesn't help
that's a good call out. So you don't want to deputize any and everybody to create their
create
own
tags.
tags, I would say.
Yeah.
You want to
Okay.
standardize them and have a few
Yeah.
things rather than 100.
Right.
And then when you surface that information, I think it should also be surfaced in a time-based way. So I don't want to see every silver medalist who's been marked as such over the past 10
Ever.
years.
Right.
I want to see ones from the past 3 months, past 6 months who've applied for this category job, maybe in this geographical
Mm,
area, right? So those are all the
right.
nuances of reporting that you can do with iSIMs, and then put them in the right place in the right user group.
Got it.
Yeah.
Where else can sourcing leverage this role?
Yeah. So iSIMS has a CRM tool, um, and they also have a candidate experience management tool.
Hmm.
Those systems are very sophisticated as well. And again, there are some nuances in the way that information. So CRM was originally a company called Jibe that iSIMS acquired a while ago,
Yep.
right?
I remember
And
them.
so
Yep.
there are nuances around how that information is passed from CRM to iSIMS and where it ends up. So that's something that your system administrator, it's actually a hot topic of conversation in our community. And iSIMS customers are collaborating to figure out the best way to manage those two systems together. Right.
So as a sourcer, it would benefit you to get involved in that or at least learn from that because it helps you with how the information gets into the ATS.
Common complaint I hear is, why didn't they just come to me and ask me that question as a
Yeah.
system administrator, right? Instead of not asking the question or complaining to their boss or
Not knowing that you can even ask.
exactly. Yeah. If your system, so here's the thing, it's like a lot of our, so we get implementation customers who are going, just starting out with iSIMs, and we get optimization customers. And a lot of times they come to us and they're like, you know, it's a mess. Like, please help. Right? It's a mess because you never realized that you needed to have a competent person in that role, right? To continue to optimize it, enhance it, and report adequately, right? Just
It's a
getting,
mess because you never put anybody in charge, and then
yeah.
you took the egg beater and ran it around all over the data.
Oh, and you gave user admin access to 20 recruiters.
Right. Everybody has admin access. Yeah.
Everybody's an admin. Why
Yeah.
not? Yeah,
Why not?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. What could they do?
What could possibly go wrong?
Well, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Pleasure.
Everybody that is a guest, especially for their first time, um, I'm not just jumping to conclusions and assuming you might want to come back. You may not ever want to come back,
I
but
would love to. Absolutely.
awesome. All right, good
Yeah.
to hear. But everybody does get asked the same thing, and the first of those two questions is, who should be our next guest?
Ah, yeah, yeah. I'm gonna say Brian Sherlock, the
Okay,
CEO, the CEO of Sync to Hire. Sync to Hire, they're a new company, and they're basically building a Slack for recruiters. And I embedded Sync to Hire in our config site, so you can embed it directly
mm,
into
okay.
iSIM, so you can
It's
have a
a
great communication
conversation.
interface.
Okay, got it.
Yeah,
All right,
exactly.
good,
I think it'd
good.
be a
That's
great
great.
fit.
I
Yeah,
usually don't get like really straight answers. Like sometimes, like, well, depend. So I appreciate you giving me that. I'm going to reach
yeah,
out. Of course, they may or may not accept,
yeah.
but that's really good. And then the final kind of wrap up question, which does vary a little bit from time to time. But what I want to do with this is I want people to really have something to think about for themselves. And most folks really do catch the recording of the show as opposed to live.
Yeah.
We only have about maybe 1,000 people live, but multiply that times I don't know how much in recordings
Yeah.
in the podcast distribution. So I want them to come off listening to this and have something that they think deeply about themselves,
Mm,
that they want to that you think that they should ask themselves and answer themselves. So
mm,
what is something related to what we talked about that listeners should think about and chew on for themselves?
mm. And what's the persona here?
Basically anybody that is in the umbrella of talent industry, so talent management, HR, the whole thing, just people out there, what's the one hill that you feel like you're willing to die on and people aren't really thinking enough about and they need to go think about it?
Yeah, I would say AI literacy.
Oh, okay.
AI literacy. So even if you can't use AI at your current job, you should be using it in your free time and just have fun with it. Just do
Okay.
creative things with it. Just get to know it because there is there are emotional hurdles to staying up to date with technology that's advancing so quickly, and it
Mhm.
generates a lot of fear. And I've gone through my own phases of this where sometimes I just have to turn off and I'm like, I don't want to see one more post about
You feel
AI.
like you're getting left behind or you're not catching. Yeah, I know what
I
you mean.
work in tech and I get overwhelmed, right? So prepare yourself emotionally by playing around with it now so that you are prepared to use it professionally when it's no longer an option whether or not to do so.
That's really good advice. There's the emotional barriers that we don't think
Yes.
about.
Yes.
So, I mean, literally just like pick one thing and just play with it and see what it.
Yeah, just make fun images or whatever. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
One thing.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
then start with that.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just sign up for ChatGPT and start messing around with it and see
Wow.
what it can do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So I'm going to put the systemadmininsights.com as the community
All right.
up here, and also the podcast, which I
Yes.
had to shorten a little bit. So this is you can listen to this on Spotify, Spotify 3YQUPGP for listeners. So that's the spotify.fi/3YQUPGP. And of course, if you want to connect with Alex, here's Alex's LinkedIn. Thanks a lot for being a part of the show. Appreciate it. And definitely would love to have you back, especially as these things evolve and mature. Next up, folks, if you want to come back, we have Dart Lindsay. Dart was in the industry many, many years ago and has left TA. He was referred by Jeff Hunter, another character from the mean days of you think things are changing now. They definitely were changing a lot back then when technology was just starting to take root. And Jeff referred Dart into the show because the work that he's doing now in his own way. He's talking about the crisis of what he calls the working dead, employees that have emotionally checked out.
Yeah.
So he's not in recruiting anymore, but he's definitely a product architect in our space. He's going to
Sounds
be on the show next
that
week.
sounds great. Well, Shelley, thank you. I really enjoyed this and I'm looking forward to coming back.
Yeah, thanks a lot. All right,
Yeah.
everybody, be
All right.
kind to yourselves, and we'll see you here next week.
All right. Take care.
Bye bye.